बिल्कुल उसी बात को अगर हम ध्यान में रखते हैं तो ये सत्र उसी से जुड़ता है कि वैश्विक परिप्रेक्ष्य में भारतीय साहित्य की नई दिशाएं कहाँ तक हैं, क्या है। इस सत्र करने के लिए आमंत्रित करना चाहती हूँ मंच पर आदरणीय अभय मौर्य जी को। प्रोफेसर अभय मौर्य जी, आप इंग्लिश एंड फॉरेन लैंग्वेज यूनिवर्सिटी हैदराबाद के संस्थापक कुलपति रहे हैं। हम सभी तालियों से आपका अभिनंदन करते हैं। आपने रूसी साहित्य में विशेषज्ञता हासिल की और 15 से अधिक पुस्तकें और 50 से अधिक शोध पत्र प्रकाशित किए हैं। आपकी पैराबल इंग्लिश हिंदी डिक्शनरी भारत की सबसे बड़ी और बेहतरीन इंग्लिश हिंदी डिक्शनरी मानी जाती है। आपको रूस का प्रतिष्ठित A.S. पुष्किन मेडल, हरियाणा गौरव सम्मान और सफ्दर हाशमी अवार्ड जैसे सम्मानों से सम्मानित किया गया है। वर्तमान में आप मॉस्को स्थित रूसी स्टेट स्पेशलाइज्ड अकादमी ऑफ आर्ट्स में प्रोफेसर एमिरेट्स हैं। आपका इस मंच पर बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। मित्रों, इस मंच पर हमारे साथ जो अन्य वक्ता रहेंगे उनके बारे में भी आपको थोड़ी सी जानकारी दूं और उन्हें मंच पर बुलाऊं। उनका परिचय मैं बाद में पढ़ती हूं, लेकिन इस वक्त मैं उन्हें मंच पर आमंत्रित करना चाहती हूं। हमारे बीच डायना मिकेविचने हैं। आपको आप मंच पर बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। प्रोफेसर किनफोंग सिंह नोंग किनरिह, आई एम सॉरी अगर मेरा उच्चारण इसमें गलत हो तो, आपका भी इस मंच पर बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। सुश्री लक्ष्मी पुरी जी हमारे बीच में हैं। आपका इस मंच पर बहुत अभिवादन अभिनंदन है। श्री नवतेज सरना जी से आग्रह है कि कृपया मंच पर आसन ग्रहण करें। सुश्री सुजाता प्रसाद जी से भी अनुरोध है कि कृपया मंच पर आएं। सचिव साहित्य अकादमी से अनुरोध करूंगी कि आपका सम्मान, पहले उसकी प्रक्रिया हो जाए, उसके बाद हम लोग चर्चा पर आते हैं। इस सत्र के अध्यक्ष आदरणीय अभय मौर्य जी का स्वागत। लक्ष्मी पुरी जी का स्वागत। नवतेज सरना जी, डायना मिकेविचने, सुजाता प्रसाद जी, और किनफोंग सिंह नोंग किनरिह जी का स्वागत। भारतीय साहित्य अब विश्व मंच में एक नई पहचान बना रहा है। अनुवाद के माध्यम से देशज भाषाओं की नई रचनाएं अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर पढ़ी जा रही हैं। प्रवासी लेखकों ने भारतीय अनुभवों को वैश्विक संदर्भ में प्रस्तुत किया है। स्त्री विमर्श, दलित चेतना और समकालीन सामाजिक मुद्दों पर आधारित साहित्य ने नई संवेदनाएं जगाई हैं। डिजिटल माध्यमों से लेखन की शैली और पहुंच बहुत व्यापक हो गई है। कुल मिलाकर भारतीय साहित्य अपनी जड़ों से जुड़ते हुए विश्व साहित्य में सार्थक संवाद कर रहा है और नई दिशाओं में आगे बढ़ रहा है। इस सत्र के लिए जैसा कि हम देख रहे हैं, हमारा बिल्कुल पैनल तैयार हो चुका है, तो इस सत्र की शुरुआत हम करते हैं। आदरणीय सुजाता प्रसाद जी से शुरुआत करना चाहती हूँ। आप लेखक, कला समीक्षक और धरोहर संरक्षण की पैरोकार हैं। आपने सामुदायिक स्वास्थ्य, ग्रामीण आजीविका और कला के क्षेत्र में महत्वपूर्ण कार्य किया है। आप भारत सरकार की साइंटिफिक एडवाइजरी कमेटी फॉर हेरिटेज रिसर्च के सदस्य हैं और अहद अनहद की संस्थापक भी। आपकी हाल की पुस्तक जयप्रकाश नारायण की जीवनी पर आधारित है। आप इंस्टीट्यूट फॉर ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट के बोर्ड ऑफ गवर्नर्स की सदस्य भी हैं। आपका इस मंच पर बहुत स्वागत है। और एक बार ये फिर दोहराना चाहूँगी कि हम समय की सीमा का थोड़ा सा ध्यान रखें और कोशिश करें कि 5 से 7 मिनट के अंदर अपनी बात को रख सकें। आपका बहुत बहुत आभार।
सर्वप्रथम साहित्य अकादमी को बहुत बहुत आभार for five distinguished speakers, and you're going to listen to many scholarly discourses. To stop myself from shooting the breeze and deviating or meandering from what is expected from me, going into unexpected directions, I have typed out what I wanted to say and scribbled a little text, and I'm going to read from that. Edward Said wrote that our histories are interconnected and intertwined, and this would include our literary histories too. South Asia is home to a quarter of the world's population, and India's population accounts for 70% of that number. However, translations from our languages account for less than 1% of all translated literature published in US and other English-speaking countries, reaching out to a very small percentage of global readers. If we focus on Indian literature alone, then too it is evident that most of the literature published in the West are English language originals, a trend that began in the 1980s with the publication of Salman Rushdie's contemporary classic, Midnight's Children, that did not only win the Booker in 1981, but the Best of Booker and the Booker of Bookers Award. And the contenders, believe me, stretch back to almost half a century. Considered a landmark text in post-colonial literary history, Rushdie's success lies in the thematic content, the reimagining of the birth of modern India, but equally in its stylistic features, a combination of Latin American narrative technique of magic realism and India's oral traditions. The book created space for emergence of a new generation of Indian writers, a post-colonial generation that was truly inventive. It rejected the traditional conventions of social realism and decolonized the language by using untranslated colloquial words and expressions. There was a radical shift in the approach to translations too. The most recent reflection of it can be seen in Deepa Bhasti's translation of Bhanu Mushtaq's Heartlamp that has taken this year's International Booker Prize. A translation that, I'm quoting, ruffles language, I love the expression, and chooses to retain rather audaciously a number of Arabic, Kannada, and Urdu words without using italics in the translated text. Another watershed moment that radically changed perceptions of Indian writing in English came with the publication of Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things. A rich and complex novel set against the backdrop of communism and caste politics, it shows an exquisite way of telling a story, creating a world that lives and breathes. The book was immediately recognized as a major literary achievement and sat on top of the bestseller lists in US, Britain, Australia, and India for several months. By the end of 1997, the year it picked up the Booker, it sold no less than 4 million copies globally in 24 languages. It has since been translated into more languages than I can remember, I think 40 or thereabouts, and has never been out of print. What about India's multilingual literary traditions? The tide, in a sense, turned about a decade ago with the repositioning of translated Indian literature in the wider global narrative. How did this come about? The International Booker Prize, one of the most prestigious awards that celebrates the best fiction across the globe, translated into English, certainly played a big role. Daisy Rockwell's translation of Gitanjali Shree's Ret Samadhi, The Tomb of Sand, was the first Hindi book to have won in the prize's 70-year history in 2022. It's important to know who published it. It was published by Title Access, a non-profit press founded by Deborah Smith, with the prize money she won at the first iteration of the revamped prize for her incredible translation of Han Kang's The Vegetarian in 2016. Her first publication, or the first publication of her press, was Sangeeta Bandyopadhyay's Bengali novel, Yogini, translated by Arunava Sinha. This was followed by other major translations from Indian languages. 2022 was also the year when eye-opening and absolutely mind-blowing numbers were shared by the organizers. The figures showed an exponential increase in the sales of translated fiction by nearly 22% compared to sales just about a year ago. Most popular amongst readers under 35, who accounted for 50% of the sales. Shri has been writing for more than 30 years, and 3 of her previous books were translated into English. Daisy, too, has been translating Urdu and Hindi fiction for a long, long time. Notable among her translations are Upendranath Ash's Girti Diware, Bhishma Sani's Tamas, Usha Priyamvada's, I think 2 books, Bachpan Khambe Lal Diware, and Rukogi Nahi Radhika, and a novel by Krishna Sobti and others. Tomb of Sand was her 9th translation, but the first to be published outside India. Then what was about the Tomb of Sand that struck such a chord with publishers, readers, and judges? It is a book that speaks to the pluralism of the world in a language that is inventive and playful and fairly ingenious in its use of linguistic aerobics, that transforms actually a 739-page epic about a woman who refuses to get out of bed into a major literary achievement. A book that is sure to get worldwide readership is Heartland, and I just talked about it. It's an extremely endearing and relatable little short story collection by Bhanu Mushtaq that brings together her writings from 1990 to 2023 based on the everyday life of women navigating the fault lines of caste, class, religion, and gender. It's been published by And Other Stories, a Sheffield-based publishing house that runs a not-for-profit crowd-funded model of publishing and is currently handling 2 other major translations, Srikant Verma's Magad and Gitanjali Shri's The Roof Beneath Their Feet. And when one talks about translations from Kannada, another book that deserves mention is Vivek Shanbag's Ghachar Gochar, translated from Kannada by Srinath Perur. It saw a spate of translations in Indian languages after it was published by Harper Perennial in 2015 and grabbed the imagination of readers globally when it was published in the US and UK. The sheer number of publishers and translators who have come forward to take the book to a global audience is remarkable, with recent editions being published in French, German, and Italian. What is it that has turned this little, again, a small Kannada novella into such an international sensation? Arunava Sinha, who translated the book into Bengali, feels that it is its rootedness in a world that is unique, intriguing, and alien to readers in the West. In this context, I would also like to mention Perumal Murugan's Pyre, translated by Aniruddhan Vasudevan, that made the longlist for International Booker in 2023, the first ever Tamil book to be ever longlisted. Another definitive, impactful prize that brought Indian writing to a larger worldwide forum was the DSC Prize for South Asian Literature, set up in 2010. It has seen winners like Cyrus Mistry, Amitabh Bakshi, Jhumpa Lahiri, although she is an American author of Indian origin, and Jeet Thayil, amongst others, whose debut novel, which was a woozy tale of opium addiction set in Bombay, became the first Indian writer to win the prize the year Amit Chaudhary's novel, The Immortals, was shortlisted. However, when we talk about directional change, I feel the real directional change will only come when publishers across the world shed their ethnocentric colonial biases and attitudes and publish writings from India. The Cross-Continental SALT project, which is South Asian Literature in Translation, is a positive step in that direction. Set up by the University of Chicago in partnership with the American Translators Association, PEN, the British Council, and Words Without Borders, it aims to strengthen each part of the publishing chain across the English-speaking world. It will certainly be a game changer in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We have with us Sri Navtej Sarna ji, an author of most recently published novel Crimson Spring, which has won the KLF Award of the Best Fiction Book of 2022. Navtej Sarna's earlier books include the novels The Exile and We Weren't Lovers Like That, the short story collection Winter Evenings, works of non-fiction Second Thoughts, the Book of Nanak and Indians at Herod's Gate, and the translations of Savage Harvest at Zafranama. Shri Sarnaji is a professional diplomat for nearly 4 decades and was India's ambassador to the United States, High Commissioner to the UK, and ambassador to Israel. He has also served as Secretary to the Government of India and as Foreign Office spokesperson. His earlier diplomatic assignments were in Moscow, Warsaw, Thimphu, Tehran, Geneva, and Washington, D.C. You are welcome on the dais, sir.
Thank you very much, and with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I just set out a few ideas on the subject being the trends in new trends in Indian literature with a global perspective. So what I really want to start off with the idea is that it's impossible to talk of Indian literature in one generalization, given the kind of diversity we have seen in these last 2 days, given how much and what the Sahitya Akademi deals with in terms of languages, 24 languages, literatures. It's very difficult to talk of any particular trend which applies to all of Indian literature. I think Sujata has already laid out a very detailed treatment of how Indian writing in English, particularly in the last 3 or 4 decades, has fared. And I just wanted to also address only the Indian writing in English. You may say it makes no difference, because it very much in the way of Tolstoy's Happy Families, in which all happy families are happy in the same way, all literature is also literature in the same way at one level. It's all about the basic well springs of emotions, the primordial instincts of rivalries, jealousies, power and wealth. And at that level, all literature in India is the same. All literature across the globe is the same. But that we take for granted. What we have to talk about are the particularities. What are the peculiarities of each particular literature? And each particular literature comes out from the historical experience, from the social situation, from the idiom and the metaphor come from the richness or otherwise of that language. So in that way also, Indian writing in English is also simply literature written in another language by Indians, a language which at one time was foreign, which one time was the language of the imperialist or the colonizer, but slowly, in many ways, we have changed it and we have made it our own. Similarly, all across the world, you see different literatures. You see Russian literature, you talk of Latin American literature, you talk of French literature as if they were one. And perhaps they have less difference than Indian literature has within itself. So I think, leaving aside generalizations and keeping the time limit in view, I would like to simply read that the engagement, the birth of Indian writing in English. And it's important to remember, because if we are talking what's happening today, we have to know what happened in the past. That essentially can be traced to the conflictual engagement between the colonizer and the subject race. And the earliest writers were already engaged in reclaiming the self, but they had no option but to write in what was considered the language, the elite language, the English language. They had no other tradition to fall back on except the great English literary tradition. And only then could they be accepted as civilized or acceptable. So there was an internal struggle going on to pay homage to the muse of English literature and yet talk about themselves And the writers of this generation, to name just three, were the famous names like Henry Derozio, Toru Dutt, and Michael Madhusudan Dutt. But then soon thereafter, a spirit of fierce nationalism, a revolutionary spirit, came into Indian writing in English, marked most importantly by Aurobindo's writings. And Aurobindo's writings then engaged the world at a different level. And that is again part of our inheritance. Though Tagore himself would not like to be described as a writer in English, but the fact is that even his rough translation of Gitanjali shook the world. And you only have to read W.B. Yeats' praise of Gitanjali to know that what an impact he had. So there was the revolutionary aspect, and then there was the lyrical aspect, both of which came about in the 20s and thereabouts. Thereafter, a different change took place. I'm trying to jump quickly. Was the great trio, Mulk Raja Nand, Raja Rao, and R.K. Narayan. Now, these three were also trying to free themselves from the great English literary tradition, but were not quite able to. Although their themes were intensely Indian, and their inspiration was the Gandhian struggle. Each one in his own way talked about villages, talked about the social issues, talked about caste, and with the spirit of Gandhi. But yet they were writing in a language which was not their own. And this comes across most importantly in Mulk Rajanand's own statement, when he says that he has been shaped by the double burden on my shoulders, the Alps of the European tradition and the Himalayas of the Indian past. Now, it was clear that they had to choose English to write, but it was an intellectual choice. It was not an emotional choice. As Raja Rao said, one has to convey in a language that is not one's own the spirit that is one's own. So that was the 30s. And in the post-colonial realities, you have a list of names, many before Salman Rushdie. You have people like Anita Desai, Bhavani Bhattacharya, Kamla Markande, just to name a few. And you can see the themes and styles are changing. As India is becoming independent, India is engaging with new social realities, new economic independence and power. And it comes to broadening, to themes like the family, human relationships. And the most important, the language too is changing. The language is becoming more confident. And here, I think you reach the pinnacle of this in Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children, which has been called the chutneyfication of the English language. How he takes the English language and twists and tears it apart and produces almost another language. And then there were other books. I think Arundhati Roy's book has been mentioned in details. Yes, I was completely shocked when I opened one of the chapters and it was called Good Man the Laltan, Chota Man the Mombati. And I said, how can this book be called an English novel? But it was. And then you read Vikram Chandra's Sacred Games, which has more Bombaya and Punjabi galis than possibly any book in the vernacular. And then it succeeded as a major English book. So what I'm trying to say is, and I can see the chairman trying to signal me discreetly, so I will wind up here, that there was a phase, unfortunately, in the 90s, post Salman Rushdie and post the great followers of Salman Rushdie like Amitav Ghosh, Vikram Chandra, Shashi Tharoor, all the people who succeeded eminently with their novels at that time. There was a phase of exotization of India, if I could call it that. There were people who were writing just to get published in London and New York and in Paris and other international capitals just by making India exotic. I don't want to go into particular books, but everybody who has read them knows. Fortunately, most of these books vanished. They were trying to write about bright burning, caste, and all that, because that was what the West wanted. Fortunately, that trend is over. And today people, Indian writers, are writing confidently. They are writing about themes which concern them, not what the publisher liked. and they are comfortable in their skin as writers in English. And the language is something which is our own today. I write in English, and I don't think I'm writing in a foreign language. I think in English, so I have no problem thinking or writing in English. But the fact is that today, when you go to an international book fair or an international bookstore, you will see as many books by Indians writing in English as you will see Russians writing in Russian in translation, or the French, or the Latin Americans. And this is a trend which is only going to increase by what has already been mentioned by Sujata in terms of the translations. And, only a small part of the iceberg of Indian literature, which is the Indian literature written in English, has yet been known to the world. We have a wealth out there from different languages, and it will be translated, as the two last International Booker Prizes have shown, and more will come into it. And soon, one day, we will be once English literature, but as distinct as American literature is from English, or Canadian is, or Australian literature is. And I'm confident we'll be much richer. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for making some very important references in your speech. We would like to now invite भारत की पूर्व राजनयिक और संयुक्त राष्ट्र की वरिष्ठ अधिकारी सुश्री लक्ष्मीपुरी जी को मंच पर बुलाना चाहूँगी। आपने 28 वर्षों तक भारत का प्रतिनिधित्व किया, हंगरी और बोस्निया हर्जेगोविना में राजदूत रहीं और बाद में 15 वर्षों तक संयुक्त राष्ट्र में विभिन्न उच्च पदों पर कार्य किया। आप अनकैडेटेड में इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड डिवीजन की डायरेक्टर रहीं और यूएन वुमेन की संस्थापक डेप्टी एग्जीक्यूटिव डायरेक्टर भी रहीं। आपको प्रतिष्ठित एलेनोर रूजवेल्ट प्राइज फॉर ह्यूमन राइट्स से सम्मानित किया गया। आपकी पुस्तक सॉल्विंग द सन राष्ट्रीय बेस्ट सेलर बन चुकी है। आपको बहुत बहुत स्वागत।
The previous two speakers have really laid a very rich groundwork for what I'm going to say. I'm not going to look back, but I'm going to look forward and present some, as I see it, some ideas on the new directions of Indian literature in the global perspective that we've been asked to cogitate on. And let me also begin with a slight difference with my colleague and friend Navtej Sarna, who said that there is no one Indian literature. I see Indian literature as one in so many ways, tied with so many threads together, although they may be, they are woven together in so many ways. So that's a separate discussion altogether, but I do want to say that. And for me, the new directions are 4 directions. Chaturdash, Disha. In Vishnu Sahasranamam, there is one name of Vishnu, which is Ameyatma. And this means one whose essence is immeasurable. So for me, the first direction, the new direction or renewed direction for Indian literature is back to the future, back to the great mining of this immeasurable civilizational and cultural treasures and stories, our epics, our folk literature, our philosophy, our spiritual heritage. And I know that all the regional literatures, they mine this and will continue to do that. And also, there is a re-evaluation of this. And there has to be a recalling, retelling, and enriching, reinterpreting, and also linking ancient themes
to modern dilemmas and taking it to the world. And this has happened. And I don't want to, because we don't have too much time, but all the great writers like Bhairappa, Ramdhari Singh Dinkar, Shivaji Savant, K.M. Munshi, Agneya, Subramanyam Bharati, Raja Rao was mentioned, who upheld India's moral and philosophical traditions, linked it to and we can link it, and many writers today have used them as a basis and are taking it forward into the world in new ways and rejuvenating and inspiring Indian literature going forward. And also it is getting global attention and have become all-time classics. Now, contemporary authors like Amish Tripathi and Anand Neelkantan are driving what is called a mythic renaissance, revitalizing epics and mythology, making Indian civilizational narratives nationally and globally and intergenerationally, that is the important thing, intergenerationally accessible and commercially successful. Then there is the other direction that I am seeing, and I would like to see our Indian literature grow and go in the context of the global perspective. And that is that today we are in the midst of another kind of remaking and reimagining of a nation. So going back in history and shedding the colonization of history and rewriting history, including the phase of the freedom movement, that era, and the young generation of that era, how they thought, how they struggled. I think that is a very important way to go, to relive that, to bring that out in literature, and illuminating it through the lens of India and Indians. For too long, it has been seen through Western eyes or other eyes. So also it's about bringing together the different streams of national, regional languages and literature. I think yours was more a plea to bring all of them together, and I agree with that. And that is one of the big trends that we have to support, and I know Sahitya Akademi tries to do that in so many ways. Into the ocean of the great Indian ocean of literature. And then we need to also look at national heroes, bring them back to life with all their strengths and their struggles and their warts. But it's important to understand them and to see how in the current, what does heroism mean in today's context. Then there is, there used to be this Basham's book called The Wonder That Was India. But I would really like the third trend or the third direction to be about the wonder that is India. And the literature that we bring out to capture the transformation that is happening, the scale and scope of transformation that is happening in India. Whether it is the unique perspectives that only a civilization as old and continuous, a country as vast, as diverse, as rich in human experience as India can. And then the great Indian literature that has universality reflects the human condition with integrity and authenticity. And that's why, as was mentioned, it is getting so much currency in the world. It must capture transformation on a scale and scope the world has not seen before in human history. Whether in rural life, urbanization, in social evolution and revolution, future-facing adoption of technology and new media, science fiction, time travel, exploration of other universes, all of that is part of this new direction. And many of our writers are doing that. And one major aspect of that is the feminist literature that is emerging from India and providing its own lens on the dynamics of the changing gender relations and women's perspectives, and there are many writers who are doing that. Another aspect that I want to take a few more minutes to also go into two other aspects. I know English writing has been referred to, but I would like to refer to redefining universal literary canon. Another new direction is about how we must invade and redefine and make our own the universal literary canon, which has traditionally been defined by and as Western canon and literature, and is connected to a broader transformation that is underway in global literature. And so for that, we need to write not only in our own Indian languages, but also in multi-country languages like English, French, Spanish, and other languages. And I think some of that and the regional to global transitions are happening because of what has been mentioned. Examples have been given, Tomb of Stand and the Heart Lamp and all of that. And the digital platforms are helping so. So today's stories from India and Global South are asserting themselves, judged not by the yardstick of colonial nostalgia, but by their own aesthetic and moral worth. And more inclusive voices also representing those unheard of and historically marginalized, I think that was mentioned, by gender, caste, class, or colonial legacy, are reshaping what is considered universal. And yet, the literary gatekeepers too often reward only those writers from our regions who echo cultural or national self-loathing. That paradigm must shift, and I think is shifting. Excellence must be benchmarked within India and the South with confidence, not by the sheer habit of going by North standards. Very quickly, I want to mention my book, Swallowing the Sun, and how it really picks up all of these themes and takes them forward. It's a book that really is, it covers the themes of Shakti, Swaraj and Satyagraha, how they intertwine in India's awakening, Nari Shakti. It's also about the struggles and achievements of a young generation of that era, resonating with the present and being a prophet of the future, and also also bringing in the national aspect, but also the universalist principles of and values of dignity, justice, freedom, and triumph of the human spirit, and that resonate with the ideals of the United Nations, of which I had been a part for so many years. And also my novels, like all novels that we go forward with, must seek to endure by engaging with the transcendentals of truth, beauty, and goodness, asserting everyone's right to self-realization. Finally, I would like to say something about enriching the global garden of English literature, just this last point, sir. So, English, once the language of colonizers, is now a shared space of civilizational dialogue. Indian, other Asian, African, and Latin American writers have enriched it with their own imaginations, challenged the Western gaze. And I too have tried to do that, as critics have noted, and I've joined those like Navtej, Vikas Swarup, and others in trying to enrich the global garden of English literature with our exotic plants, our idioms, our philosophy, our inner word, nativizing it and infusing it with an unmistakably Indian fragrance. And as Salman Rushdie, who's been mentioned, famously said, the empire writes back. And indeed, we have not just written back, we have tried to rewrite very contours of global literary universe. Lastly, India's literary presence at global festivals and academic institutions and hosting them like JLF and Sahitya Akademi once strengthens our soft power, reinforces our cultural and intellectual influence, but also sets our own narratives globally. That's a very important part. And let us embrace literature as a vessel of asserting and projecting India's civilizational greatness and embellishing it with ever-refreshed layers of modernity as spun through the spirit of our enormous youth power. I think that is what the future direction is also about. The largest cohort of youth in history that we have in India, their voices, their angst, their aspirations, their innocence, their awakenings, their infinite potential. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Actually, swallowing the sun means nothing is impossible. So that is what the speech was about. And there were so many untouched aspects which were added there. Thank you so much, ma'am, for this. We would like to call now Professor Kinform Singh Nong Kinri. He is an eminent poet, drama and fiction writer in Khasi and English. His latest works are The Distaste of Earth was long listed for JCB Prize 2024 and shortlisted for the Kerala Literature Festival Book of the Year Award 2024. The critically acclaimed epic novel Funeral Nights, Late Blooming Cherries, Haiku Poetry from India and Lebba, Stories from Northeast. His other recent works include The Yarning of Seeds and Dancing Earth, an anthology of poetry from Northeast. Professor Kinform Ning Song Ning Kindra, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, is the recipient of Shakti Bhatt Award, Veer Shankar Shah, Raghunath Shah National Award, Tagore Fellowship, etc. He teaches literature at Northeastern Hill University, Shillong. You're welcome, sir.
Mr. Chairperson, my colleagues, friends, a very good afternoon to everyone. First of all, although I know I would be wasting time, first of all, I would like to begin by saying to Alkaji, do not mind my name. You know, there was a British filmmaker who came to Shillong. His name was Doug Smith, D-O-U-G, Doug Smith. And he called me Flim Flam. My name is Kinform, he called me Flim Flam. And very politely, I called him, yes, Mr. Doug. So this is a very personal take on the theme of rootedness and new directions in Indian literature. A very personal take, and I'm using this book as an example. I'm drawing on this book as an example. Please don't mind me; it's bigger than me. So, on the topic of new directions in Indian literature, let me begin by saying that I am a firm believer in literary rootedness. This does not imply insularity or a preference for the local over the global. For instance, my epic-length novel Funeral Nights contains stories that have clung to me since childhood, nursed over many years with tender care in the flower pots of memory. The stories are, without exception, Khasi and native to the soil, nurtured by the sun and rain of home. And yet, the novel has been described by national and international reviewers as an enchanting and revealing epic ensemble. This is from The Guardian. The reason is that the stories reveal not only their specific qualities, but also their humanity and universality. The roots of one's own writings may have sunken deep into one's land, but their spreading branches may yet enfold the universe. Rootedness led me to a genre-bending fictional work in Funeral Nights, a path-breaking novel in both its writing and subject, according to the Telegraph. Obviously, one of those texts that only one person in the world could have produced, according to Yale University Press. In writing this book, I wanted to clear the wounded name of the Khasi people, abused in all sorts of ways by commentators from within and outside the culture. I wanted to write about traditional Khasi life and manners in their totality, presenting an authentic picture of Khasiness to the world. For this, I had to conduct an extensive research, read hundreds of books on a wide range of topics, visit places and speak to many people. That way, I gathered an enormous amount of information, but I did not want to write a tedious non-fiction work or tell the story of my people in a manner that would make me sound like a wearying pedant. I wanted to make the book both entertaining and instructive, engaging with my readers through stories about diverting incidents and characters, stories gathered from lives' varied experiences, carefully picked like mushrooms from the dark floor of a lush pine forest. That was when I cast around for the appropriate technique. However, I discovered that no one technique was sufficient to carry such a vast and complex array of materials. That made me think of combining several narrative frames in the book. I chose Boccaccio's The Decameron, Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, The Arabian Nights, Plato's Socratic Dialogues, and Gao Xingjian's Soul Mountain, all fused with the Khasi funeral tradition of storytelling nighttime wakes. The result was a book of dizzying diversity, as The Wire put it. Nobody could say what genre of work Funeral Nights is. Even Jerry Pinto, who wrote the blurb, says, "This is the Moby Dick of Meghalaya, a novel of huge ambition and tremendous appetite." Or is it a novel at all? Reacting to it, a Yale University Press reviewer says, "There are no other books remotely like Funeral Nights in content. Uninformed, it is anomalous in contemporary fiction. There are some analogies one could draw to Italo Calvino or Umberto Eco or a few others, but they would only mislead if pursued too far. The book's originality is unquestionable." This is not a eulogy for this seminal and shape-shifting novel as The Guardian described it. I'm just trying to accentuate the argument that rootedness, far from being narrow and conservative, far from being a narrow and conservative approach, can lead to the most modern of trends in Indian fiction, where a novel may accommodate several genres at once, like life itself accommodating all the motley experiences within it. Such a novel may contain, like Funeral Nights, root stories and little stories, short fiction and flash fiction, together with travelogues, treatises, ethnology, colonial and pre-colonial histories, post-colonial counterpoints, cultural history, religious philosophy, mythology and its many retellings, sociopolitics, memoirs and life writings, biographies and literary essays, sports writing and literary journalism, fantasies and post-human fantasies, surrealism and realism, nature writings and eco-fiction, little dramas and fables, parables and fairy tales, songs and poetry, including the Power, a unique Khasi verse form that Sahitya Akademi has included in the Encyclopedia of Indian Poetics. All of these elements can be found in this book. Yeah. I'm almost done. Such is the garden of forking paths, Borges's phrase, that rootedness can lead one to. Global realities and issues such as identities and migration may be rooted in the local. They certainly are with us, and be understood only if we analyze locally by going into the root causes. We may even grapple with issues like genocide and ethnic cleansing through our rootedness. Take the following poem by a Khasi poet. Some zealots are sending me a message. Let us pray for our Zionist brothers. With deep anguish, I think of our people's 3 commandments, especially 2. Live in the knowledge of man and God, earn your virtue. I wonder if praying for Zionists is living in the knowledge of man and God, or earning my virtue. I will certainly not pray for genocide. I will certainly not pray for ethnic cleansing. I will certainly not pray for the evil from hell unleashed upon the earth. A great remorse washes over me. A great abhorrence overwhelms me that these my people should idolize devilishness for godliness. The poet's rootedness in the religious faith of his people, based on the sanctity of conscience and what is virtuous and just, has led him to this determination to denounce evil wherever it appears. My last bit. Be it in the forking parts of genres or the forking parts of issues, rationality and modernity. We may take a pick from any of the trendy genres enumerated earlier, or combine a few or every one of them in one book. This is precisely what has been done in Indian fiction through Funeral Nights. Thank you.
Thank you so much for adding your perspective to this subject. आप मंच पर आमंत्रित करना चाहूँगी भारत में लिथुआनिया की राजदूत महामहिम सुश्री डायना मिकेविचियाने को। आपके पास 28 वर्षों का कूटनीतिक अनुभव है। आपने चीन में भी लिथुआनिया की राजदूत के रूप में काम किया है। आपकी किताब ऑल माई इंडियाज़ और भारत से जुड़े कई शोधपरक लेख लिथुआनिया भारत संबंधों को एक नई दृष्टि प्रदान करते हैं। भारतीय अध्ययन तथा भारत और लिथुआनिया के संबंधों में आपके योगदान के लिए आपको कोलकाता विश्वविद्यालय से डॉक्टरेट की उपाधि प्रदान की गई है।
Dear Secretary, Dr. Srinivasa Rao, dear co-panelists, dear chair, all the lovers of literature and creators of literature, I'm really very happy and excited to be here with you. I thank Dr. Srinivasa Rao for classifying me as half Indian to qualify for this conference. But perhaps I will wear my Lithuanian cap and try to give you my Lithuanian, European, global perspective into Indian literature that I see. But the first thing I want is to remove the cap of ambassador, because I'm here as a reader, as an avid reader and lover of Indian literature. Thank you. I have been here for 2.5 years as ambassador, but I have taken part in at least 7, 8 literature festivals and conferences, which gave me a wonderful exposure to literary scene in India, and these conferences all over. My last one was in Guwahati, before was Hyderabad. So I tried to get out of Delhi bubble and be everywhere and see and inhale the air of different parts of India. But it also struck me how rich and diverse Indian literature is, but also how much inter-translation work is being done so that Indian literatures can read each other and talk to each other. And I was extremely interested to hear, I'm very happy to be the last to speak, because I'll just discard whatever I jotted before, and I'll try to react to what my co-panelists have said. For an outsider, it's a very interesting moment to just even imagine and understand how the literature of India functions when it consists of so many different strands. I mean, linguistic diversity is just one diversity, right? You may go on and on listing the aspects which may be different and diverse, but also unite at certain level. But also the other thing which surprised me, how much in sync with global literature an Indian writer is and creates. Because global literature is translated, is read in original languages, it's published, it functions here as a very, important part of a literary discourse. And therefore, I think that while Indian literature is very global and has become very global, it's a global literature which has to catch up with sort of getting more of Indian literature and accounting it, because I always, when I speak to people in Lithuania or somewhere in Europe, I always mention that India is 1/5 of humanity. So in whatever terms, whatever ways you look at India and the world, it's always 1/5, and that's a lot. Okay, so my connection to Indian literature started very early. I was a child, and I was a little unusual child because I was in love with India for a very simple reason. I saw Umrao Jan at 12, and that was it. I never recovered from that love which struck me. So I started reading whatever was available, and very little was available in Lithuania under Soviet rule. You talk about post-colonial perspectives in literature and in everything, but we also have our own post-colonial angle, because we had a situation where our colonial rulers were deciding the reading list for us. So very few names were available. Those which were available, again, probably went through very strict censorship. Surprisingly, the Indian sacred literature was not allowed. And in Lithuania, we never had any spiritual text from from India published. Later on, I came to know that it functioned well underground in Moscow. It was called samizdat, and that's something you do yourself and publish under the table and circulate it only to close friends. Little bit of that trickled down to the Soviet, republics, including Lithuania, but that was a strict no. You should not be boasting about reading Bhagavad Gita in Soviet times. But the few names that are available, I read, and I still remember. I read them several times. Mulkraj Anand, Two Leaves and a Bud was probably one of my first ones. Shani, Kala Jal, right? Then a few other names which we got, a few names were translated through Russian, but we surprisingly had a translator in Lithuania who was a self-taught linguistics professor. Professor of linguistics professionally, but a self-taught Hindi translator who translated 5-6 books, Hindi, novels into Lithuanian, which I gobbled up and read it a few times. I still have them in my library there, and among them were a few, at least, Markandeya's Possession and R.K. Narayan's Guide, were English, right? They were written in English. And now I was looking to, listening to Navchetji, remarks on English as sort of part, a strand of Indian literature. Surprisingly, as an outsider, I never felt the difference. Of course, my first readings were in Lithuanian, so whatever was translated either from original or through Russian. But I never made any distinction whether in which language it was written. To me, it was essentially Indian. And so Indian that I fell in love with it. It was, to me, the travel to India was a very distant perspective at that time, but these books were my India and my tickets and my dream sort of journey to India, the best I could, dream of. Then, of course, when we became independent, Indian literature really came in big way, in waves, I have to say, in a lot of translations from different languages, very few from original languages. Then English became the medium through which Indian literature started reaching us and is now widely available. I think most of, many of writers from now north from the south are already available. But I still think that the regional literatures of India are not represented enough abroad, and this is one of the areas where I would think it is needed to make some efforts. And I really like the term of my previous speaker, cultural rootedness, literary rootedness, which defined that sense of Indianness to me. To me, the books were essentially Indian, and yet, I mean, it is always probably between all different literatures, the issues and the problems, emotional sort of value of the book was all the same, because the cultural context might be different, but ultimately you are left with the same impression that we are all human beings. And the more different culturally is the context, the bigger is the catharsis of understanding that, wow, but it's still about the same thing. Like, it's love, it's hate, it's spiritual journeys, and ultimately the cultural context is very, very interesting means for you to think about the universality of language, of literature. No, of course, today, if we look at Indian literature, it has so many choices. It has choices in shape, in means, in technical aspects and formats, digital options, and so on. But I would like perhaps to stress two genres, two types of literature, which I think are very different, and I know the time is short. One is historical fiction. And here I am in the panel with two of the favorite authors that I have with me. I'm very proud, because now I'm reading the book by Navtej now, Exile, something that carries me through, Dalip Singh's fate and journey. And I'm a historian of India, so for me it's very, very interesting to see the intro that he makes in the beginning. Said, okay, we all know about Dalip Singh. You know, in Lithuania probably people don't, but what did he feel? What was the feeling, this boy who became a Maharaja, who was disposed, who was betrayed, who was basically exiled and died in extreme distress? What was he feeling, and how this feeling is related to the feeling of a faith? The other book, Lakshmi's book, Swallowing the Sun, is also a wonderful journey through the history of India. It was my cultural guide of some sort when I was traveling and discovering places, but I think it's a wonderful means for a country also to convey the story of the country to others. And it has an extremely big value abroad, not just inside. And the other one, which I would like to stress, I was recently taking part in the Festival of Oral Literatures, and there I really understand the value and that sort of treasured moment of our oral literatures, which, I mean, here I also have offers. Rashmi has introduced me to the Bodo stories from Assam, and then Somi Roy to Manipuri stories, and I'm hearing about Khasi stories, so I'll be very much eager to read them. It's an amazing but very often forgotten strand of literature, which I think needs to be not just reckoned with inside, but also exported and given to the world. And with a very final word, I still have to put on my ambassador's hat and say a few words about Lithuania-India literary dialogue, because Sahitya came to us at a very right moment when I came and lamented the fact that we are very beginners, just first steps introducing our literature. So we had a wonderful collaboration, and a few of our writers came and we had discussions at Sahitya Akademi, and currently the first fiction book from Lithuania is already translated and is being published. Rekhaji, the translator, is here, and I'm so happy, and I really want to thank Sahitya for this wonderful collaboration, lending hand to small and unrepresented literatures. But also, I have to say, these writers, these artists whom I brought gave me a great lesson, which I want to share with you about what world needs from India. So allow me to indulge in one more minute. Because, I'm bringing this one very well-known, famous writer of dystopian stories to India, and his book, Jaroslavas Melnika's book, is being translated. And he comes and tells me that his whole inspiration was Indian philosophy. So it's like whole world round, the trip completes in Delhi, where he acknowledges that he has been reading it earlier in a clandestine way and later openly. Something which is dystopian, extremely modern, contemporary writing is basically inspired. Then I'm bringing the narrator, who's a storyteller of contemporary storytelling. Storytelling has been lost in Europe. There is no such original thing. But she also says, we absolutely need to hear Indian storytellers, because you're still alive. You still carry that in the proper way, in the families and the lineages, and we Europeans lost it. So with these two examples, I leave it, but I want to sum up. There is a lot that India and Indian literature can teach the world. And I think we have to go back beyond that West, which is not really a monolithic West. I also come from the West, but I'm from a very, very different background, and I think we need to share and learn a lot from each other. And finally, I want to complete by thanking you all. We have a peculiar language. Lithuanian is considered to be the closest, perhaps one of the closest sister languages to Sanskrit. So as ambassador, I always felt that it obliges us, to do a lot more in literature that we have been doing. So this is an engagement which I want to mention as one of the very pleasant engagements that I have taken up, and I'm very, very happy to be with you this afternoon. Thank you so much.
थैंक यू सो मच डायना जी, आपने बड़ा ही आत्मीय संबोधन रखा अपना, और वैश्विक परिप्रेक्ष्य में भारतीय साहित्य की नई दिशाएं सचमुच इतना बड़ा विषय था, और इतने सीमित समय में ये हमारे विद्वान वक्ताओं की खासियत थी कि उन्होंने इतने कम समय में इसको पूरा किया। और ऑफ कोर्स मैं अपने अध्यक्ष महोदय जी का ज़रूर धन्यवाद करना चाहूँगी कि उन्होंने हमेशा सोई एक उनकी निगाह ज़रूर थी घड़ी पर, और इसलिए ये पॉसिबल हो सका कि अपने सीमित समय में हमने इसे पूरा किया। मैं बहुत ही आदर के साथ अपने आज के सत्र की अध्यक्षता कर रहे आदरणीय अभय मौर्य जी को मंच पर बुलाना चाहूँगी इसको सारे को समाप्त करने के लिए। बहुत धन्यवाद सर।
Writers and scholars on the dais and in the hall, President of Sahitya Akademi, Madhav Kaushik ji, Secretary Sahitya Akademi, Rao Sahab. Indeed, I am pleasantly not only surprised but happy that Sahitya Akademi and Rashtrapati Bhavan has organized this rare conference. I am a student of Russian literature. I did my PhD at Moscow State University. And I was wondering when I was in Russia that every writer, or for every writer, there is a museum. There is a museum of Tolstoy, there is a museum of Pushkin, Dostoevsky, everybody. So much they care for their literature, for their writers, so much respect and regard they have for their literature. I was wondering if we could emulate this kind of thing in India. And presently, this event has come for the first time, though our first Prime Minister was the President of Sahitya Akademi, creator and President of Sahitya Akademi, Pandit Nehruji. And it was an important fact, but India deserves more. India deserves more of such conferences, such seminars, symposia, and it's very good that this has been conceived and executed by Sahitya Akademi and Rashtrapati Bhavan. Having said that, I would like to make a few rambling remarks about today's this session. Whenever a great upheaval takes place in the world or in a country, literature also undergoes great changes and upheavals. In fact, when October Revolution took place in Russia, Mayakovsky, you must have heard this eminent poet, Russian poet Mayakovsky, and others declared that Tolstoy, Pushkin, Dostoevsky, etc. should be dumped from the ship of modernity into the sea. They wanted to discard everything which was in the past because they wanted to create everything new. And so much so they propounded that the punctuation marks, the consonants, vowels, etc., should not be considered important at all. In fact, some poems were written without a consonant, without a vowel, or something like that. So literature reacts to the upheavals. This has been, but not every reaction is positive and productive and constructive. Like the Russian experiment of the avant-gardism, so many groups came into being in Russia at that time, Acmeism, Imagism, and there was even a group called Nothingism, that we want to create literary works in the name of nothing. Today, in India, we are witnessing not similar kind of events, but technology has ushered in great upheavals in the society. This is the age of electronics, this is the age of computers, this is the age of artificial intelligence, and what have you. And what I am seeing, that today it's not possible for readers to read lengthy literary works, elaborate literary works. This machine has replaced everything. Everything. My dictionary, which is a 1900-page dictionary, English Hindi dictionary, and it was reviewed almost very widely in the entire press. But nobody cares for the dictionaries these days because this machine is there. Similar things are happening with literature also. And you can't write voluminous literary works like War and Peace or like Don Quixote and of Cervantes. People simply don't have time to read, or they don't. And this machine is killing almost everything. Almost everything. Not only dictionaries, but even literary works. And you have clips here, you have all kinds of things, and people are hung up on this machine. This is, I won't call it a great upheaval. In many ways, it has made our life easier, but at the same time, it has created great challenges for our literature. Under the circumstances, can we create literary works, and as a result, what is being created is, I am not against that, comics or graphic novels and so on. I don't know whether it's right or wrong, or whether it is positive or negative. I have not gone deeply into it, but lengthy novels, voluminous novels like Suitable Boy of Sahitya, or as I said of Tolstoy, War and Peace, etc., is neither possible to create nor possible to read. Then, can we talk of international or global perspective? Can our Indian novels, which are not so great, if we create them, can they be called members of the committee of what is called world literature? Because that is the second part of this session, of the topic of this session. Now, what is world literature? Is it a totality of all the best works of literature, or is it a totality of masterpieces of literature? I think that is not so. In my opinion, world literature is created by those works which have or which can or which have been crossing the borders of time and space. Shakespeare created his works in 16th century, and it's readable even today. Shakespeare created in England, it's read in India, Russia, elsewhere, Lithuania, everywhere. Cervantes' Don Quixote was created in 16th century, same is true of this work. So I would call that such works are members of the Committee of World Literature. Our own work, Kalidasa's works are translated into Russian, into other languages, and they are read. So they can be called members of the Committee of World Literature. But can we create today, under the circumstances, members of the world literature under these challenging times, in these challenging times? My answer is, I am pessimistic about it. We have to take this machine critically. It has some positive aspect, but majorly very negative aspects. So, India has, Russian poet Zhukovsky has called Kalidas's works better than Homer's work, for example. And he had said that wisdom does not reside only in the West. Wisdom resides everywhere. It can reside in the West, it can reside in India, and in fact he said wisdom, if anything, originated, took birth in India, in the East. So wisdom is not a monopoly of one particular nation or of the West. Wisdom can be born anywhere, everywhere, and particularly in India, we have fortunate to have ancient literature. We are fortunate to have great ancient epics like Mahabharata and Ramayana. Only thing is, I would prefer if these epics are interpreted scientifically. Mythification of our literature only harms us. Mythification, I don't know whether it is positive or negative, but I personally think this is not scientific. So in order that our works become members of the Committee of World Literature, we have to create such literatures which can cross the boundaries of time and space and become the members of the world literature. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for summing up the whole session so wonderfully. Birds don't require any passport or visa to fly wherever they want to. worldwide, and so as literature. आज जिस तरह से हमने इन 2 दिनों में लगातार अलग अलग सत्रों में साहित्य के बदलते हुए परिप्रेक्ष्य को देखा अलग अलग संदर्भों में और उसका जीवन पर प्रभाव, मुझे लगता है ये अभी एक लंबे समय तक हमारे भीतर गूंजता रहेगा। ये साहित्य अकादमी द्वारा किया गया अपने आप में एक बहुत ही सार्थक और सारगर्भित प्रयास है, जिसके लिए मैं आदरणीय समापन वक्तव्य के लिए आदरणीय श्री के निवास राव जी को मंच पर बुलाना चाहूँगी। डॉक्टर श्री के निवास राव विचारक, विद्वान, साहित्य विशेषज्ञ और कुशल प्रशासक हैं, जिनके पास साहित्यिक प्रबंधन और प्रशासन का 3 दशकों का अनुभव है। वे फरवरी 2013 से फरवरी 2013 से साहित्य अकादमी के सचिव हैं। उनके प्रमुख ग्रंथों में मिथ्स, प्लेज एंड गिरीश कर्नाड, भारतीय साहित्य और संस्कृति और संपादित पुस्तकें वितिस्ता, यूनाइटिंग कल्चर तथा इंडियन स्टोरीज वॉल्यूम 1 शामिल है। उन्हें दिल्ली तेलुगु अकादमी अवार्ड, किन्नेरा उगादि पुरस्कार, भारतीय वाङ्मय पीठ प्रशासन पुरस्कार, नंदी सेवा ट्रस्ट का सृजन शिखर सम्मान, छत्तीसगढ़ के शहीद महेंद्र कर्मा विश्वविद्यालय से डिलीट, आंध्र प्रदेश सरकार का नागरिक सम्मान, कला रत्न सम्मान और जी न्यूज़ का स्पेशल अवार्ड फॉर विजनरी लीडरशिप प्राप्त हुआ है। ऐसे विभूति को मंच पर बुलाते हुए मुझे बहुत ही गौरव हो रहा है। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर।
धन्यवाद अलका जी। Respected friends, this program is a milestone in the history of Sahitya Akademi, and we got this rare opportunity to organize a literary conference in the Rashtrapati Bhavan, and we thank sincerely from the bottom of our hearts Her Excellency Srimati Draupadi Murmu ji, Honorable President of India, who has kindly inaugurated this 2-day conference, and without the encouragement of our First Lady, this program would not have materialized. As we all know, the Honorable President Madam has always shown a keen interest in Bharatiya Sahitya. Avid reader herself, Her Excellency Srimati Draupadi Murmu ji stood with us at each step as a pillar of strength in this program and always encourages organizing literary languages in as many events as possible. I join the President, Vice President and literary fraternity in conveying our heartfelt thanks to the Honorable President Srimati Draupadi Murmu ji. A big thank you from the bottom of our hearts to Sri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat ji, Honorable Minister of Culture and Tourism, Government of India, for his support and encouragement not only for this program but for all the activities of Sahitya Akademi. My thanks also to Sri Vivek Agrawal ji, Secretary Minister of Culture, Srimati Ranjana Chopra ji, Special Secretary and Financial Advisor, Minister of Culture, Sahitya Akademi President Dr. Madhav Kaushik ji, Vice President of Sahitya Akademi Professor Kumar Sharma ji, for all their interest and encouragement in organizing this program. Friends, change is something that is a constant in this world, and over the past 2 days, the wonderful set of scholars have enthralled all of us and took us on the journey to find more about change in literature as well as literature of change. They also highlighted current changes in the field and the improvements that are happening. I thank all the writers, poets, diplomats, and scholars for accepting our invite and participating in this conference. The presentations by each writer and scholar were top class, and success of this conference is primarily due to their participation. Friends, as we all know, through history, changes in literature have not resulted changes in structures or modes of communication, but in the core philosophies and paradigms. In the past 6 to 7 decades in India, the emergence of large number of women writers, the rise of Dalit literature in all the languages, as well as the impact that regional literature of India is having in the global arena through translations are some of the changes that are reshaping and redefining literary engagements in the country as well as across the globe. Earlier, only Indian English writings used to reach global readers, but today, thanks to wonderful translators, that India has, we are seeing the writers from many Indian languages are being read and appreciated all over the world, and we already heard from our learned scholars now. Hopefully in the near future, we get to see large number of translations of tribal and oral literature of India, that is predominantly unexplored area, into Indian languages as well as into foreign languages. That will be the most wonderful change that one can aspire for. Today, technological revolutions are transforming many fields and are having massive impact on the contents in many subjects and areas. Will these result in the changes in the core of the literature and other allied subjects? That is a question. The very discussion of these is very exciting. Conferences like this present unique opportunity for the institutions and all the stakeholders to bring together the best minds, understand various perspectives, and map the future actions with the help of everyone. Sahitya Akademi, with the guidance and help from the Ministry of Culture, does undertake a review of literature in the country once in few decades through a series of programs. I will be failing in my duty if I don't thank Srimati Deepti Umashankar, Secretary President of India, Sri Ajay Singh Ji, Press Secretary to the President of India, Sri Sunil Trivedi Ji, Officer on Special Duty, Rashtrapati Bhavan, Ms. Navika Gupta Ji, Deputy Press Secretary to President of India, all the officials of Rashtrapati Bhavan for their support and help in organizing this event. Particularly, I should mention here categorically Sri Ajay Singh Ji, Sunil Trivedi Ji and Navika Gupta Ji. These three, I should not say Trimurti, but these three people, we had several meetings with them in the last 1 month or so to materialize this event, and they helped a lot in the smooth functioning of this event, and we thank you for your constant support and helping us in having this historical event in the Rashtrapati Bhavan by the Sahitya Akademi, and we expect the same kind of cooperation and support, and also extending invitation to have a more and more literary events in Rashtrapati Bhavan in the same way. With these few words, once again I thank every one of you, of course the wonderful audience, the literary fraternity of Delhi and NCR, who were yesterday and today made this event a grand success, and we expect the same kind of encouragement and support with your presence so that we can have a more and more programs like this. Thank you all. And also I should thank Alka Sinha ji, who wonderfully completed the program since yesterday. I should thank her. Thank you.
Rather, I would like to give my thanks, personal thanks to Rao Sahib for guiding me each and every step, and the program went up so well, so smoothly, and thank you so much for your love and affection that you have given me. Though the valedictory session is over, but I would like to say there is one more attraction to the program. We will have a short break of 15 minutes, and after that यहाँ 300 साल हो रहे हैं अहिल्या देवी होलकर जी को, उसका एक बहुत सुंदर प्रेजेंटेशन अभी यहाँ होने वाला है जो हिमांशु वाजपेयी और प्रज्ञा शर्मा यहाँ प्रस्तुत करेंगे। तो हम लोग 15 मिनट का एक छोटा सा ब्रेक लेकर के चाय पी करके फिर वापस यहाँ आते हैं, और इसके बाद